In February 2023, a white balloon drifted across the United States. It was large enough to see from the ground, slow enough to follow on television, and strange enough to trigger an international crisis. The Pentagon identified it as a Chinese high-altitude surveillance balloon. On the 4th of February, an F-22 shot it down off the coast of South Carolina. So why use a balloon? Because no single tool can see everything. A balloon can remain over one area, while a satellite passes overhead. Wiretaps listen, cameras record, and databases connect faces to names. Tools once used for wars and spies often become part of everyday life, in streets, shops, workplaces, and phones. Surveillance is no longer just about watching people. It is also about identifying them and deciding what to do with that information. To understand how this happened, it helps to begin with the first systems built around the possibility of being watched. In the late 18th century, Jeremy Bentham proposed the panopticon, a prison arranged around a central watchtower. Prisoners would never know when they were being observed, so the possibility of surveillance could shape their behavior even when no one was watching. In 1794, the French army used a hydrogen balloon called l'Entreprenant during the Battle of Fleurus. Observers watched enemy movements from above and sent reports to commanders on the ground. Historians disagree about how much this affected the battle, but it showed the value of aerial surveillance. In the late 19th century, French police official Alphonse Bertillon developed standardized photographs and identity records. By turning a person's appearance and physical features into a searchable file, police could compare records and identify people more easily. These systems established two lasting ideas. People could be watched from a distance, and their identities could be turned into records. Telephone networks created a new form of surveillance. Private speech now traveled through infrastructure that could be intercepted somewhere else. In 1928, the United States Supreme Court decided Olmstead v. United States. Federal agents had tapped telephone lines without entering the defendant's property. The court held that the Fourth Amendment had not been violated because there had been no physical trespass and no seizure of a tangible object. Justice Louis Brandeis dissented. He warned that new technology could give government more subtle and far-reaching ways to invade privacy than physical force. East Germany's secret police, known as the Stasi, was founded in 1950. It watched citizens, intercepted communications, used informants, searched homes, and arrested suspects. It also worked with police, customs officials, employment offices, and other state institutions. This gave it access to almost any information it wanted. The scale of the system was enormous. The Stasi archive contains about 111 kilometers of documents. Since 1992, more than 1.5 million people have requested access to the files collected about them. But the greatest fear came from uncertainty. A colleague, neighbor, or friend might be an informant. A private comment could appear in an official file. Secret judgments could affect someone's job, travel, or freedom without giving them a chance to respond. The panopticon was no longer only an idea for a building. It had become a network of people, telephones, records, and state power. Abusive surveillance was not limited to authoritarian states. In 1956, the FBI began COINTELPRO in the United States. It first targeted the Communist Party, but later expanded to civil rights and anti-war groups. The program went beyond investigating crimes. It tried to disrupt organizations and damage the reputations of their members. By the Cold War, American U-2 spy planes could photograph large parts of the Soviet Union. But these flights were dangerous. On May 1st, 1960, the Soviet Union shot down a U-2 flown by CIA pilot Francis Gary Powers. Powers was captured, and the incident damaged relations between the two countries. Satellites removed the risk to pilots, but they did not provide live images like modern systems. The American Corona satellites used film. The exposed film was dropped back to Earth in a capsule, which aircraft tried to catch as it fell by parachute. The first 12 missions failed. Then, in August 1960, Corona returned about 3,000 feet of film, covering roughly 1.65 million square miles of Soviet territory. This was more than the entire U-2 program had photographed up to that point. The images gave American leaders better evidence about Soviet weapons. They reduced uncertainty, but satellite reconnaissance also created a form of global observation that was secret, permanent, and difficult to stop. 1964 to 1965, Martin Luther King Jr. was placed under surveillance using wiretaps and hidden microphones. Later Senate investigation found that some of these microphones were used to collect personal information, not to protect national security. The goal was to find information that could be used against him. In 1967, the Supreme Court changed its approach to to wiretapping in Katz versus United States. Investigators had attached a listening device to the outside of a public phone booth. The court held that the Fourth Amendment protects people, not merely places. The law had changed because the wall of a home no longer matched the reach of the technology. Technology usually changes first, and the law responds later. In 1975, the Senate's Church Committee investigated abuses by the FBI, CIA, NSA, and other agencies. Its work exposed COINTELPRO and led to stronger oversight and new legal protections. The same pattern often repeats. A threat is used to justify secrecy. Secrecy reduces oversight, and surveillance spreads beyond its original target. Digital technology made surveillance much easier because governments no longer had to hear what people said, as records showing who contacted whom, when, and for how long could easily reveal relationships and daily routines. After the attacks of September 11, 2001, the United States expanded secret surveillance programs to fight terrorism, but in 2013, documents disclosed by Edward Snowden brought several of these programs into public view. One of these initiatives was the NSA's bulk collection of domestic telephone records under the USA Patriot Act. Although the records did not include the actual content of people's calls, they could still reveal political ties, medical concerns, religious communities, and personal relationships. In 2014, an independent oversight board found that the program had no sound legal basis, threatened privacy, and provided little value, leading Congress to end that form of bulk collection in 2015. Ultimately, while metadata may not contain the conversation itself, it is far from harmless, as collecting enough information allows the overall pattern to reveal the story. Facial recognition brings Alphonse Bourdillon's filing card system into the digital age by capturing a face with a camera and using software to translate its unique features into data that can be compared against other images. This technology is primarily used in two ways: a one-to-one check that confirms whether a person matches the photograph on a passport or phone, and a one-to-many search that compares an unknown face against every single entry in a database. The one-to-many search carries significantly more risk because the system merely suggests a possible match rather than providing a definite answer. System accuracy depends on a variety of factors, including the specific software, image quality, lighting, camera angle, and demographic representation in the database, with NIST research showing that many systems perform inconsistently across different demographic groups. For instance, a clear photograph taken at a controlled border kiosk yields far more reliable results than a blurred image captured by a street camera. Accuracy, however, is not the only major concern surrounding this technology. In 2023, the U.S. Federal Trade Commission prohibited Rite Aid from using facial recognition for surveillance for 5 years after alleging that poor safeguards led to thousands of false alerts that directly harmed customers. Ultimately, facial recognition software only generates a potential match, leaving it up to an organization to decide whether to question someone, remove them, or contact the police. Surveillance transitions into real-world power the moment that mere possibility is treated as absolute fact. Today, no single device needs to see the whole picture, as combining multiple sources, a process known as sensor fusion, allows authorities to move much more quickly from observation to action. A satellite may spot new vehicles at a remote site while radar tracks movement through clouds or darkness. A balloon or drone can hover over the area. A street camera might capture a driver's face for identity matching, and phone, travel, or financial records can ultimately connect that person to others. These tools serve critical functions, such as enabling satellites to warn of missile launches, map natural disasters, reveal troop movements, and document destruction, while facial verification speeds up voluntary identity checks, and communications intelligence helps prevent attacks. However, these very same systems can just as easily be used to track protesters, monitor political opponents, control borders, and record people's everyday movements without their consent. Furthermore, the boundary between government and private surveillance is becoming increasingly blurred because private companies now operate satellites, gather massive data sets, and deploy cameras in shops, transport hubs, and public spaces, allowing governments to simply purchase information they once had to collect themselves. Ultimately, surveillance is no longer controlled by a single agency, but has instead evolved into a vast network of governments, private companies, cameras, sensors, and databases. The main problem with surveillance is not simply that people are being watched, but rather the fundamental imbalance of power that exists between the watcher and the person being watched. While the operators of a surveillance system understand how it functions and can easily combine information from multiple sources, the people under observation may not even realize the system exists, often possessing no straightforward way to view, correct, or delete their personal data while still bearing the consequences if the system makes a mistake. Governments have responded to these challenges in vastly different ways across the globe. In the European Union, key provisions of the AI Act took effect in February 2025, generally prohibiting police from using real-time remote biometric identification in public spaces, while allowing only limited exceptions under strict conditions. Conversely, rules in the United States remain much less consistent, as federal reviews have repeatedly uncovered widespread issues with training training, policy enforcement, privacy protections, and overall oversight regarding the facial recognition tools deployed by law enforcement agencies. To address these vulnerabilities, critical safeguards must be established, including clear rules, warrant requirements, detailed usage logs, mandatory human review, data storage limits, and the right for individuals to challenge a match. Ultimately, a surveillance system should never be judged solely by its original intended purpose. We must also critically consider who might control it in the future, which additional databases it could eventually connect to, and what automated decisions it might be permitted to trigger.